Welcome back to episode 10 of On the Journey with me, your host, John Paul Dombrowski, where I talk about my journey. I talk about the things that are interesting to me. Psychology, spirituality, hurts, healings, excitements, disappointments. Man, and maybe that's a good place to start with is disappointments. I have come to embrace the experiences of disappointment with a kind of love, and that sounds kind of weird. There's parts of me that absolutely hate being disappointed, and I think a huge part of my life has been working really hard so that I can guarantee that I don't get disappointed. So a lot of my life has been trying to outwork disappointment, and yet so many of those things that I worked really, really hard at, in the end, I ended up disappointed in. What I've come to learn, and I feel like I'm beginning to really deeply internalize this, is becoming a more stable sense and belief, is that I can actually love disappointment. I don't love the feeling. But what I can do is I can love the experience of disappointment because it reminds me of my humanity. And it reminds me of my limitedness. And limitedness, I find, actually draws out tenderness. And so disappointment reminds me of my limitedness. And then I'm learning to embrace around that limitedness with a kind of compassionate love, with a playfulness. There's a feeling, right, in gambling when you're like, all right, this is really high stakes. This is really high stakes. And so I've come to see disappointment as a passing experience. But the most powerful changes in my life, I would say, some of the most powerful changes in my life have come from moments of supreme disappointment. The feeling of, man, this is not what I thought it was. I'm not sure if I've told this story already, but I'll tell it again. It's such an important moment in my life. It was December of, I'm not sure which year, maybe 2023. And I was working really hard. My goal at that point was to become a psychologist. I wanted to get my PhD. I'd already had my master's in counseling. I was already working as a counselor for like a couple of years, but I wanted to get a psychologist. I wanted to be Dr. Dombrowski. And what I wanted to study was global mental health. So I wanted to commit my life's work to developing programs and research into how we can effectively aid humanitarian workers in local places who are experiencing humanitarian crisis, how we can do what's called task shifting, which is teach them specialization in skills. Essentially, it's like, how can I teach people in these areas that are hurt how to provide therapy and counseling for everybody? But these people aren't like therapists. They don't have formal training. So task shifting is all about, okay, in areas where there is not specialty care, how can we equip non-specialists with appropriate specialized resources? So one of these forms is group therapy and group interpersonal psychotherapy. But so my goal at that point was I wanted to go to Colombia. They have a global mental health program that specializes in providing the type of therapy that I provide and doing this task shifting model where they research, they travel all over. Dr. Helen Verdelli, and they travel all over the world providing trainings when environmental disasters, when humanitarian crises happen, to support the local community. I just think that's like the coolest thing ever. So what was I doing? I was already working 2 jobs. So I had to study for the GRE. I was waking up at 3:30 in the morning. I was studying for a couple hours. Then I would do my morning routine. Then I would go to work for one job for a couple hours. Then I would see clients in the afternoon from like 11 till 6. Then I would come home. I would eat. I would get into bed and I would do the whole thing over again. And I believed so strongly. I said, this is my mission. This is my goal in life. I believed it was I felt like I was being called by God into that. It felt like this was a season that I just had to sacrifice, that I just had to push through. And then one day, my wife came to me and she told me that we were pregnant. She told me we were going to have a baby. And I feel so warm and tender towards that moment right now. But when I heard that news, my first thought was, oh no. My second thought was, oh shit. My third thought was, I can't handle this. And it wasn't about the fear of being a parent. It wasn't about being intimidated by that. It was the feeling of, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't handle one more thing on my plate. I felt disappointed in that reaction. And I was able to step back in the coming days and weeks and say to myself, and I knew it even in the moment, I knew that this was some of the best news of my life, but I wasn't available for it. There was a miracle happening in the womb of my wife, the fruit of our love, and yet I wasn't available to it. And so I was able in that moment to step back and realize, JP, this is not okay. There's a misalignment in here. And in that moment, not in that moment, but from that moment came some of the greatest shifts that I've made in my life. Ultimately, I decided like, hey, I need to slow down. I need to step back. I need to be available. Not every season can be one of these seasons of grind. And ultimately, it took time to come to this. But I decided to step away from one of my jobs, which I loved. And then actually in the next year, I decided, you know what? I'm going to let go of this dream to get my PhD. And there was freedom in it. Because what I realized is how much I just wanted to be Dr. Dombrowski, like my dad. To have a doctor in front of my name. To feel respected. I realized how much I wanted to do big things in the world. But that disappointment woke me up to a realization that my priorities are out of whack. Disappointment, if we allow it, can bring growth that we never would have expected. Because what disappointment is it's a loss of a known that we want. But what it opens us up to, by removing the known that we want, it actually puts us in this liminal space to consider many unknowns that we don't even know. That's what makes them unknowns, I guess. And so even likewise, in my career, I've recently experienced some big disappointments, just moments of like, oh man, I was working really hard. I was working really, really hard for something. And it didn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to. And this is one of the reasons, right? Christ says, don't toil to store up treasures which you can have here on earth. Toil for the treasures in heaven that will never go away. And what I hear in this is Christ saying, and these are the words of Jim Rohn, a motivational speaker from way back in the day, life is not about what you get. It's about what you become. I wish I had it memorized by heart, but I don't right now, but I'll give it my best. This poem by Rudyard Kipling called If. And there's a line in it which he says, if you can take the heap of all your winnings and risk it all in one hand of pitch and toss and lose it and start out from new beginnings, but never breathe a word about your loss. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat both those imposters just the same. He goes on and he says, then yours is the world and everything that's in it. And once more, you'll be a man, my son. And it's much longer than that. I'll find it and read it. Well, I have it, but it's on my phone and I'm recording on my phone. But disappointment is such an underrated emotion. And on top of that, I think it's one of the emotions that culturally we really, really dismiss. But disappointment is the prefigurement of grief. And grief is coming for all of us. Because the one thing that we can guarantee from every one of our lives is that we will die. And it's not until we confront this mortality that we can live fully. Our death makes accomplishment so obviously foolish in the grand scheme of things. I heard this thing the other day, and a guy was talking about how he saw this post, and the post said something like, we believe that we have to do something to be worthwhile. But there's many cultures, Native American, indigenous cultures all around the world, that believe that you don't have to do anything. Humans are just a part of this whole beautiful creation, just like a flower. Flower doesn't have to do anything. It's here, just like the mountain. The mountain doesn't have to do anything. The trees, they don't have to do anything. Your value doesn't come from what you do. It comes from who you are. And we want to become the type of people who can live out of a remembrance of that wisdom. Because it's so seductive to get caught up in the trap of achieving. This is our safety mechanism. But disappointment so often gets dismissed, it gets cut off. You say, oh, don't worry, look on the bright side. Hey, it's actually okay. Hey, it's not that big of a deal. Well, be grateful. Be grateful for what you have. Other people don't have that. No. We can both say, you're disappointed. You're disappointed that, I could say to my son, you're disappointed that you can't have a popsicle right now. You're disappointed that you can't have this toy. I'm disappointed that life's not easier sometimes. Yeah. But we can actually look at that disappointment with tenderness. This has been a big theme for me lately, so forgive me if you hear it again from me. Our task is not to make these feelings smaller. It's to make ourselves bigger. Any attempt at making our feelings smaller is management, and it's driven by fear and anxiety. But learning to make ourselves bigger, that's enlightenment. That's wholeness. That's expansion. That's spirituality. That's humanity. We don't have to make the pain smaller. We can become bigger. So we don't have to flee from disappointments. We don't have to run. We can actually look at these moments of disappointment and turn with tenderness and say, I know, buddy, you wanted it so bad. You wanted this to work out so bad. It felt so right. Things seemed so good. And it didn't work out. It's confusing, it's hard, it's painful, but it is the way things are right now. The way things are right now is disappointing. But I can be with you in that disappointment. And we can make space for the disappointment. You don't have to be alone with the disappointment, and you don't have to cut off from it. We can just say, hey, come on in, disappointment. The water's great. There's so much compassion for you here. There's so much space for you here. Disappointment's welcome. We don't have to shut it out anymore. That, my friends, is freedom and fullness of life.